The sermon today got the title, I Am the Light of the World. God made night and day, sun and moon and stars, and every 24 hours on this living jewel of a planet in a desolate solar system. If we choose to, we get to enjoy this well-planned, purpose-driven creation. But given the choice to live in light or in darkness, light or in total darkness, one or the other, which one would you choose? Now, no one in their right mind would choose to live forever or eternally in darkness. Life in darkness would be very different from what God designed for His human creatures. Our wonderful planet, this planet we live on, is 70% covered in ocean that in places is 38,000 or more feet deep. But everywhere, the ocean easily drops to 1,000, 5,000, 8,000 feet in depth. That far down, it's cold, it's under unimaginable pressure, and there's little to no light there. And that's where you find very different forms of life. Just so that you know, there's nothing cute and cuddly down that deep, living that deep down under the water, okay? There's things like viper fish and fang-tooth fish. And there's the giant squid. They're 60 feet long. In mythology, they were called the Kraken. Remember? Release the Kraken! And it goes out okay. It was a good. There's also Bathynomus giganteus. It's a gigantic isopod. Now, I want you to think of this. A 16-inch long, 7-inch wide, flea-shaped creature, maybe kind of like grabbing at your upper arm or your neck to suck some blood out of you. That kind of thing. Then there's the coffin fish and the vampire squid and the 5-foot-long nosed chimera, whose dorsal fin spine, if you even touch it, it doesn't have to actually go into you. You just touch it, it'll kill a human adult male. In 5 minutes. It's quick to die, okay? All right. Those things that I just talked to you about are the things of cold sweat nightmares, aren't they? I mean, you're going to be thinking of this isopod. And then you can wake up and go like, thanks. Now, I do admit, though, that in certain times of darkness, there is a unique beauty of its own that is to be seen and felt and experienced. But not ever will, when you wear darkness as a quilt to hide yourself from responsibility or to commit acts of immorality and indecency or to hurt others or yourself or to avoid the truth of Christ and the reason for His light in your life. Not ever. See, we want light so that we can see to find our way. We need light in order to see the colors and feel the warmth and appreciate the patterns of beauty all around us. We have to have light in order to live. And at this point in the sermon, I just want to say that's why we all need Jesus and a regular dose of His Word in our life, because He is the light of the world. And our text today is from the Gospel of John, and starting in chapter 8 at verse 12, if you want to turn there. The philosopher Plato once said, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when grown men are afraid of the light." Now, I want you to hang on to that loosely as you're turning in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 12. Hang on to that thought for now, because we're going to be coming back to it later. Now, light as a metaphor for truth, illumination, life, holiness, purity, God. Those are all common themes in the literature of the Bible and in other forms of literature as well. When heaven is described, it's filled with light. But eternal punishment is associated with complete and utter absence of all light and comfort. The light of truth drives away the darkness of foolishness and ignorance and sin and death. Light introduces hope and confidence and abundant life and living. From the first lines of the Gospel of John, one of his favorite descriptions of Jesus is as the light of heaven living in the darkness of humanity. He wrote, "In Him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." In fact, 16 times John uses the reference to describe Jesus' life and his ministry. And in one of his short letters, he wrote this in 1 John chapter 1. This is the message we've heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him while we are walking in darkness, we lie, and we do not know what is true. But if we walk in the light as he himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. The Bible often refers to the Word, the Bible itself, as light. Thy word is a light unto my path and a lamp unto my feet. When the Word of heaven became baby Emmanuel, that is, one of us with us, he himself then became the light. His birth was the dawn of a new age, and his resurrection bathed the entire world in brilliance beyond belief, beyond comprehension. To walk in the light is to be his follower, his disciple. To live in the light is to be conscious of his presence and his will and his lordship and his salvation. It is to pursue purity over self-indulgence, obedience over defiance. Now, to turn away from the light, to turn away from Jesus, is to willingly embrace the darkness of eternal night. There is a light that is temporary, one that is a substitute for the truth in Jesus. So again, we need to be very careful which we choose. The first point of the sermon is festival lights or the light of life. Now, in the previous chapter, we remember that Jesus has been hanging around Jerusalem for a short while here. There's a celebration going on. It's called the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles. And this celebration served two purposes. First, this is Israel's Thanksgiving. It's a feast in which they acknowledge the fall harvest and God's provision for them. It's a happy celebration and a time of joy and great rejoicing. And the second thing it represents is it also remembers Israel's deliverance from Egypt and their subsequent wandering in the wilderness for 40 years where they lived in tents or tabernacles or booths is what they were called. Now, one of the more dramatic features of the Feast of Tabernacles was the lighting of the temple area using the great golden menorah in the court of women. Now, the glow of those lights reminded everyone of the light Yahweh gave to their forefathers in the wilderness in the form of the pillar of fire that signaled the very presence of God. So this was a great dramatic event that took place. Okay, with that little bit of context, here's why what Jesus said caused such a stir in the hearts of the people, among all the people there, and an uproar with the leadership who were there in the temple at the same time. Verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Now imagine it. Jesus is saying, this light that you have been embracing and enjoying here in this temple at this time, it's eventually going to go out. I am the light that cannot be extinguished. And if you listen to me and follow me, you will have light from above always and forever and ever. Now, when Jesus applies the obvious metaphor of light from God to himself, the teachers and the preachers and the lawyers, they all have a fit. The Pharisees can hardly miss the messianic implications here, so they jump on his case like Linda at a Nordstrom shoe sale. She told me it was okay to use that. Verse 13. The Pharisees challenged him. Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid. For I know where I came from and where I'm going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are right because I'm not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law, it is written that the testimony of two men is valid. I am one who testifies for myself, and the other witness is the Father who sent me. Now, this all sounds kind of weird to us, maybe a little bit strange, but it is rooted in the demand of the law of Moses that testimony must be corroborated in order to be accepted. Now, I know what you do. You're starting to glaze over. You're going like, boring. Okay? Well, shame on you. Oh, tell us a good joke. Well, okay, I'm sorry. Shame on you. I'm just kidding. I don't mean any of that. That's the only joke I got in the sermon. Did you notice something here? I know. It wasn't very good. Did you notice, besides that Jesus did not lower his standards of truth to theirs? He did say that the only other reliable witness to his true identity was his Father, and that's the one in heaven that he's talking about here. Now, here's the problem with all of that. Those who insist on judging or deciding or trying to figure out the mysteries of heaven using human standards are going to remain in the darkness of unbelief. Because on their own and by themselves, humans cannot, and so they never get it right. You see, we cannot perceive or understand or presume to control God. So no matter who it is, when you judge the things of God according to human standards, it's always going to fall short of the truth. It's only by faith, by believing and accepting what the word of truth and life, what Jesus said, only then do we ever get to be included and enlightened so that we gain understanding, so that we see the truth for what it is. So there's point number 2, what the light of life meant for them. Now, do you see what a hopeless situation that these critics were creating for themselves? Are you beginning to grasp the depth of their spiritual depravity? Did you see what I'm talking about? They think they can understand God by human terms. They think they can control God by human reasoning and thinking. When human beings use human standards to judge and explain God rather than submitting to Him, they are guilty of the ultimate arrogance. I want you to just take this for example. The expectations the Jews had built up concerning the Messiah and His kingdom. For most of them, it seems that He was supposed to have been some kind of a military leader. He was expected to reestablish the glory days of David and Solomon. He was supposed to make everybody wealthy in a paradise here on earth. He was supposed to ride a noble steed, cut a striking figure, square off with the Romans, strike down their opponents, and so on and so on. But then came Jesus of Nazareth, born into questionable circumstances to a peasant family, and he had no real worldly aspirations. There was no spear or sword or armor. There was no promise of earthly prosperity or long and healthy life. His assurances were simple and unappealing. He said, join with me and you might well be rejected, persecuted, and maybe even killed. He didn't go toe-to-toe with Romans, but instead Jesus taught His followers to pay their taxes and to carry a soldier's pack an extra mile when conscripted into service. The unnoticed Son of God even acted like a slave when He washed His disciples' feet when they were too impressed with themselves to even think of doing such a thing. Because Jesus didn't fit the standards of human judgment, most of them rejected Him. They didn't like God's plan because it didn't fit their way of thinking. Because He wasn't their easy to manipulate, mighty, materialistic, and manly character, the one that they expected. In time, they would look their unseen, unknown Messiah right in the face, and they would spit on Him, and they would kill Him. So rather than listen, they did the only thing they knew how to do. They went on the attack, and they questioned His paternity. Maybe they were asking if Joseph were still alive, and if he was available, he could kind of clear things up for them. But maybe, and most scholars seem to think this was their meaning, they were insulting him by reminding him that they knew about the circumstances of his mother's pregnancy before her marriage to Joseph was official. You see, they couldn't answer him, and they wouldn't believe him, so they attacked him and they assaulted him. Okay, the third point is this: what the light of life means to us. That's what the light of life meant to them, but what does it mean to us? I got to tell you, I really wish this whole encounter and text would be left in its time and place and not brought into my own life. See, then I could feel smug against the Pharisees. Then I could accuse them and judge them for their unbelief. As I stand in the comfort of Jesus' light and presence, I could point an accusing finger at their short-sightedness and their foolish failure. But this text about human standards for judging the things of God and refusing to see the light of Jesus Christ in the real world is too close to home for every generation. When the famous Parisian Bastille prison was about to be destroyed in 1789, a convict was let out who had been confined in one of its windowless cells for years. Instead of dancing at the joy of his freedom, he begged to be taken back, or so the story goes. You see, it had been so long since he had seen the sunshine that he believed his eyes could not endure its bright light. He preferred to die in the murky gloom of the dungeon where he had been imprisoned than to adjust his eyes to the light, his lungs to the clean air, or his mind and his heart to freedom. He must have been driven crazy from his long sentence in prison, you say. Well, maybe. But I wonder if we don't choose ourselves to stay imprisoned by our own ungodly habits, entrenched in spiritual squalor because of laziness and fear and doubt and prejudices and reoccurring submission to bad behavior. I wonder if our small-minded and safe view of life and people and ministry and serving doesn't keep us in the darkness and out of the light of God's plan and His will for us. Folks, Jesus is saying that the safety of the religious and the everyday status quo is unacceptable to those who abide in the light of His presence. So that brings us to point number 4. We need to walk in the light. The sun will no more be your light by day, nor will the brightness of the moon shine on you, for the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Isaiah 60 verse 19 tells us. Do you remember that quote from Plato I gave you at the beginning of the sermon? We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark, he said. The real tragedy is when grown men are afraid of the light. Well, that maxim from the 4th century BC is very much applicable to the text that we've gone through this morning. It may even be a warning for us, or a caring reminder to us, or maybe a fresh hope to someone sitting here today who has been more troubled than hopeful. In this morning, the sermon this morning, the light of Jesus' presence and teaching may be calling to you to change your unbelief to faith. It may be calling you from slow but certain death to the abundant life, from error to truth, from self-delusion to clarity and certainty, from evil to holiness, from disobedience to faithful service, from prison to freedom. If you're hearing the message of God speak to you about His Son, I am the light of the world. Anybody who follows me will walk in that light. If you're hearing that message this morning, then there is no excuse for shrinking back or returning to the insanity of your own old way of living and doing things. A dark prison cell is no place for someone who God has set free. The darkness is no place for someone who has heard Jesus say, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I want to invite you this morning. We're going to sing number 277. If you want to find your way there. I want to invite you this morning. You know, you came here for a reason, your own reason. But let's say after coming here, you realize that God wanted you here. That God wants you to walk in the light of truth, in the light of His life, rather than the ways of this world. He said, I'm the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. I encourage you and invite you today to make this decision. I'm going to walk in the light of life. I'm going to walk in the ways of Christ. I will be what God wants me to be. Emmylou Harris sings on a Christmas album she has called Light of the Stable. She says, there's a light in the darkness, and the black of the night cannot harm us. We can trust not to fear, for our comfort is near. There's a light in the darkness. Well, that's Jesus. Jesus is the light that overcame the darkness. And I encourage you today to know that, to hear it, to believe it, and to walk in the light of His love. Let's all stand together.